for the next speaker, I would like to have a small introduction related to how ARIR started, and we are very happy to have John on board this year. Actually, this pandemic also helps us to be together this time, because unfortunately last year it didn't happen, but we had John Gollifer at the launch of ARIR with an excellent presentation on how this profession evolved along times. And actually, John was one of my main advisors when we set up ARIR. And as you can all see, it was a very good advice, as ARIR grew in 1 year as many others grew in like many other years. You know, it's like in the fairy tale. I'd like to invite John Gollifer, who is now General Manager of Middle East Investor Relations Association, with some views on the world of IR today. Thank you, John, for having you here.
Good evening. It is a pleasure to have this opportunity to be with you on the occasion of your second annual gala. On behalf of the Middle East Investor Relations Association, MEIRA, many congratulations on another timely milestone in your recent history. Indeed, Daniela, I fondly recall being with you in person almost 2 years ago when you launched ARIR, the Romanian IR Association. I wish to thank you, President Daniela, for inviting me back. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Today, every day, is a celebration of investor relations. ARIR has weathered a tough year like the rest of us. It is so important to do events like this through thick and thin, virtual or otherwise. The same can be said of investor relations. I'll come back to the world of IR shortly. Well done, all of you. I salute your market initiatives, your most recent IR forum, also your second, I believe, and of course, Vector, the ongoing best practice study of your market, a great example of thought leadership, which is precisely what we need. A crucial part of the role played by professional bodies like ARIR is to share IR practices and champion what we believe works, whether here in the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, or indeed in your capital market of Romania. I'm happy to share another perspective of investor relations from another part of the world. This, after all, is what makes the world of IR go round and work, given our target audience of investors, including international investors, is the same wherever we are. The world of IR, it's still here and it's still exciting. I'll talk briefly to 3 main themes: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It sounds like a song, Daniela, but I'll try not to burst into song. We'll all regret that. It seems like only yesterday that we were meeting person to person, all perfectly normal for IR people, for human beings. Remember what it was like only 8 long months ago. Didn't we take it all for granted? I don't know how many air miles we collected, how many hours commuting to and fro work every morning and evening, and how many endless meetings we seemed to need. To be fair, who doesn't like visiting new places? From Bucharest to Dubai. I know we miss that. I think some of my colleagues even miss the office occasionally. We certainly miss the feeling of being together in the same place, being able to see one another, look each other in the eye and build the enduring relationships we need in the old-fashioned IR way, the human way. Today, we are all familiar with working from home, virtual meetings and digital IR. Haven't we learned a lot in a short time? The first inquiries we received as IR people at the onset of the pandemic in March started with questions like, what about the next reporting period? Do we make our normal announcement or do we wait? It was a tough time because we weren't sure, not having been in this situation before. As we all know in IR, uncertainty in IR, in anything, leads to nervousness for both business and its stakeholders. So what can we say when we don't know? what guidance do you dare give to a scared and expectant market? And what about our upcoming annual general meetings? Given most companies had closed the financial year end, how do you do those when we're all going into lockdown? I recall dividends quickly being postponed or cancelled as companies rightly sought to preserve cash. That was easy enough, but what about the transition to virtual meetings? The period from March 2020 put an enormous strain on everyone, socially, economically, politically. Ironically, the environment did better as we stopped moving around doing so much, at least temporarily. For business, staff and customer safety came first, thankfully. For the exchanges, it was a big effort to keep markets open to play their role of price discovery and maintaining public confidence in public capital markets. For regulators, it was a question of deciding quickly what could be done in the extreme circumstances none of us had faced before. We all appreciate the importance of company law and the need to ask shareholders, after all. Above all, it was a time for investor relations to shine, to work with management and the board, keep the communications channels open, regardless of whether we had all the answers. No one did have all the answers, but to have IR at the end of the line, updating and keeping the conversation alive is at the heart of investor relations, in good times and more so in bad times. And these were horrible times. Let's not forget that. IR is all about relationships, and people remember how you responded or not. And we must remember that institutional investors act on behalf of end investors, individuals like you and I. Quite rightly, they need to complete the investment process and the investment decision, and they always have choices. It was certainly the time for IR to stand up, be counted, and make that difference on behalf of company management and boards. I'm sure you did, and I know that we have the eagerly anticipated IR Awards later this evening to celebrate your performance. But before we get to that, let's take a quick sweep of international markets from Australasia to Europe. In our part of the world, the regulators were quick to introduce e-meetings, including permitting use of virtual AGMs, which in some jurisdictions already existed. Perhaps that's the advantage of being newer to capital markets and being able to do newer things, or at least start putting in place new systems and supporting technology. In Australia and Singapore, regulators responded by initially allowing the convening of e-meetings entirely online and extended this into 2021. This has given companies some certainty in a fluid operating environment. Not all markets had this luxury. I know of delays to the next reporting period, if not AGMs, given some hesitation to be fair to companies and their shareholders. At the time, it seemed sensible to take more time given the uncertainty and just not knowing what impact a prolonged lockdown and economic slowdown, the worst crisis in nearly 100 years, would have on business, markets, and the world at large. However, at the same time, I think as investors, timely information, if not updates, are needed at all times. Let's face it, as market people, we know that the last thing markets need is gaps in information from prolonged delays in statutory reporting requirements. That's the essence of public capital markets. I believe IR best practice came at a premium as it compelled companies to ensure that the information flow continued through thick and thin by offering clear, consistent, and timely updates, if not reporting that was always spot on. We know how markets behave. Eventually, they will see the sense behind a truly good investment story, and that is the role of investor relations. Notwithstanding, it can vary from market to market, sector to sector, and of course, business to business. but what an opportunity for IR. And what about tomorrow's IR, a hybrid solution? What's really changed and what can we do to continue to promote best practice? At our own MEIRA annual conference last month, I was very excited to hear about the prospect of the democratization of investment. Suddenly, technology offers the answer to market reach, the ability to target who you see as your key stakeholders. We all know in today's world, as we are showing this evening, we can connect with anyone at any time where we choose. Accordingly, AGMs, for example, can really include all shareholders, not just the big institutions, but also the smallest investor. However, we also know from personal experience that to successfully register for a virtual event is just the start. And it doesn't always work, does it? Particularly if you are desperate to join a great event. How tempting it is to sign up to all invitations. Sounds a bit like the stream of meetings we had to attend in the good old days. To be fair, generally it works. And once logged in, we have to accept that technology must have its limits, or maybe it's just me not being particularly tech-oriented. Anyway, back to the all-important annual general meeting. What has the experience to date been? Anecdotally and more, I have heard that across international markets, it's still a mixed bag in that participation in questions and answers, real engagement with management and the board is still somewhat limited. What's new? So here's the challenge, IR. How do we turn this scenario to our advantage from, oh dear, we missed again, to not being a missed opportunity if we really want to treat all stakeholders better and have a more fruitful discussion, which by definition means listening to. Technology gives greater access, security by and large, and surely inclusion if we want it. Isn't this what public capital markets are about? The best bit about technology is that you have a verifiable audit trail of all participants, questions and discussion. In effect, all are transparent and key part of the investment process. Looking on the bright side, we will get better given most of us have only just started in this brave new world of digital IR. There is no excuse not to hold AGMs, have virtual roadshows, conference calls, and the IR list of activities goes on. I know of IROs taking calls in Asia time, continuing their day in the Middle East before joining the European time zones and ending a very long IR day in the US markets. That's long. Don't forget to pace yourself and retain a work-life balance. We all need that. Imagine what a virtual capital markets day could look like, just zooming in on the latest production line, plant, or new product. Wow. And with artificial intelligence, big data, and analytics, let's not pretend that our stakeholders, including investors, haven't also got more information at their disposal in the digital world we are living in. Here is the big opportunity for IR practitioners to learn from our experiences of 2020 and take this into 2021 as best practice. Thinking about the film RoboCop, I am not expecting robo-IRO, robo-investor, or even robo-regulator to take over our markets just yet. It is true that we remain human beings in need of company, empathy, real engagement, and relationships. That's why we call it investor relations. Yet, in concluding, let's take all the material factors in our business, including environmental, social, something that clearly came top of the list in 2020, and governance, and integrate them into our IR story. This is already happening in our markets as more exchanges and regulators issue ESG guidelines. This is how we champion best practice and lead by example, because, as was said in the Game of Thrones, another visual reference, if I may, there's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it. No enemy can defeat it, not even COVID-19. That's got to be history at some point, or at least we will learn to live with it. The world has changed. Let's keep learning together and continue changing too, including in our IR best practice. And remember, the one thing we can control, other than our enduring friendship with you good people of ARIR, is our investor relations, the supporting IR program, the IR story. So keep it going, IR people. Thank you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, including the awards, always exciting, and another great example of collaboration with Institutional Investor, the leading market intelligence partner for so many IR associations. Long may these partnerships across international markets continue. This is how we can learn together. All the best. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, John. In a normal world, some applause would follow, but you know, in this Zoom, we don't have any more applauses, but nevertheless, we thank you very much for this kind of work. And indeed, sustainability, technology, online, and now, indeed, we don't have any excuse that we do not reach investors, because it's so easy to reach. It's not even costly. There are a lot of solutions and emails, and they are more available. This is what we also noticed worldwide. Thank you very much, and all the best to MEIRA as well. And we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thank you, Daniela. Take care, all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.